finding common ground is less about where we come from and more about who we're willing to learn from. Think about it. Every day the headlines remind us of how easily we're split into groups, by background, religion, or even social status. But in my experience, those divisions often miss an incredible truth. Each person we meet has value. Growing up, my world felt defined by labels. This person's from one neighborhood, that person's from another religion, someone else shares a different political belief. But here's the thing. If we can set aside our preconceived notions and listen, truly listen, we'll discover that each one of us has a story that can enrich everyone else's lives. So today, I invite you to explore a central idea that changed my life, that anyone can build transformative relationships across cultural and social fences by embracing empathy, curiosity, and a shared sense of purpose. Over the next few minutes, I'll share how my journey, marked by adversity, unexpected mentors, and unwavering hope, reveals that opening our hearts and minds is the quickest path to genuine human connection. If we can challenge our assumptions and let empathy lead the way, imagine the bridges we can build and the doors we can unlock. Let's begin. In today's world, we are often labeled by stereotypes or preconceived notions. Those labels can feel like shields protecting our identity, but they also act as walls preventing us from seeing who people truly are underneath. But there's another side to this story. In places like Dubai, a city where dozens of cultures and faiths intersect, we see a living example of what happens when diversity meets openness. If approached with the right mindset, one that values learning over judgment, Dubai becomes more than just a tourist attraction. It's a catalyst for creativity, innovation, and relationships that might never have formed in a more homogenous setting. Back in the United States, I worked in a predominantly Mormon environment in Salt Lake City. As a woman in leadership, initially, I felt like an outsider among people who held very different values and beliefs. I've also led majority African American workplaces where I was the minority. But in both cases, by admitting what I didn't know and listening to those around me, I discovered insights, talents, and relationships that helped us all exceed. Here's the key. Every encounter, no matter how unfamiliar, is an opportunity to learn. When we trade fear and rigid assumptions for curiosity and respect, those labels lose their power. And in their place, a much richer story emerges. You know, it's funny how our sense of normal can shape us. I grew up in a white, often prejudiced neighborhood where diversity felt like an afterthought. On my street, everyone looked the same, worshiped in the same way, and went to the same schools. The idea that the world might be bigger and more varied was almost unimaginable. But when I was only 7, my father passed away. Losing him changed everything for me. My mother, who had never worked outside the home, suddenly had to find a job, leaving me and my brothers to raise ourselves. We had to grow up fast, learning how to put food on the table, how to keep the home running, how to carry on. But that fast track and responsibility lit a spark in me. I started to wonder if there was some place outside my small town, a place where people were different, yet maybe the same at heart. After my father passed, and my mother went to work, before she went to work, she wanted to take one family trip. So we embarked on a journey to see the country. I think we saw every single landmark. I can remember being a wide-eyed kid, marveling at the soaring cliffs and the endless skies. I saw families speaking languages I didn't understand, wearing clothes I didn't recognize. But I was hooked by the feeling that the world held so much more than what I knew back home. But it was back in high school that I was known as an underachiever. Someone people didn't believe would go very far. And you know what? I started to believe it too. But some years later, I was blessed with my first mentor, Jeff Kite. Jeff saw something in me that I didn't yet see in myself. He not only taught me the basics of leadership, he taught me the basics of living. Around Christmas, one year, I was struggling with my inability to provide for my children. On Christmas Eve, as I was closing up the business, I returned to my desk to find it filled with beautifully wrapped little boxes, all with my children's names on it. And a note that said, "This comes from a group of people who believe in you. Keep going." That act of kindness changed my leadership style indefinitely. At that moment, I wanted to be a Jeff Kite, to provide that kind of hope. But most importantly, Jeff reminded me that having just one person believe in you can open doors you never knew existed. Jeff opened a door and showed me my future. Those early influences might have been tough at times. Growing up with less, losing my father, and battling a culture that said, "You belong here and nowhere else." But they planted a seed of curiosity and hunger to know people outside those neat lines my town had drawn. And that seed would eventually turn into a passion for building bridges across barriers I once thought were unbreakable. I've often been asked, where do you find the courage? And sometimes, like now, it doesn't always feel like courage. Sometimes it just felt like pure survival. Just when I thought life couldn't be more chaotic, my relationship with my husband at the time ended. And on that day, I came home to an empty apartment, an empty fridge, and an empty bank account. At that moment, life demanded more from me than I thought I had to give. So I became a single parent early, working multiple jobs that barely put food on the table. I can remember nights of feeding my children first and hoping that there'd be something left for me. Then I faced a near-death experience at a surgery that went wrong. One minute, I was on the table thinking I was going to go home that day, and the next, I was in ICU 2 days later, wondering if I'd even see tomorrow. But if that wasn't enough, I lost my mother, and 2 months later, my husband. They were both diagnosed with stage 4 cancer in the same week. Caring for them and watching cancer rip them away is a heartache I'm still learning to articulate. No matter how devastating each event felt, every single hardship introduced me to someone who offered a hand when I thought I had nothing left to hold on to. Take Jackie, a childhood friend, who was like a big sister, preserving the memories I was too overwhelmed to appreciate. At my graduation, Jackie presented me with a scrapbook of all of my small victories, newspaper clippings of my name when mentioned, or even when we snapped a fun Polaroid. Back then, I didn't appreciate what a gesture like that meant, but now I see it as proof that someone believed in my story enough to record it for me. Then there was Sweetheart, who stepped into my life right when I needed faith the most. I met Sweetheart at a very difficult time. She just happened to be walking by one day and saw me crying. But instead of continuing, she stopped, looked at me and said, "Do you know God?" Sweetheart met me where I was. She didn't preach, she just loved unconditionally. Sweetheart's calm reminders that I wasn't alone, her simple prayers, her unshakable confidence in a higher power gave me a lifeline to cling on to when everything else felt lost. Moments like these taught me something profound, that no one, and I mean no one, is meant to face life's obstacles alone. We might think we're alone, but then an angel appears in some form, a Jeff, a Jackie, a Sweetheart, offering empathy, understanding, or just a moment of rest. And looking back, I see how these trials forged my belief that every person's story is worth hearing. As I reflect on my life, the clearer it becomes. Success rarely comes from just hard work or talent. It emerges when we build a sense of connection capital. And by that, I mean the goodwill, trust, and understanding that accumulates every time we choose to engage another person with empathy, curiosity, and respect. Think about it. When we choose to learn someone's real name, pronounced just the way they prefer, or when we ask about their cultures or backgrounds without judgment, we're not just being polite. We're investing in a reservoir of relationship equity that can override stereotypes and build collaborative energy. Over the years, I see how these small, thoughtful gestures can completely transform a workplace. I didn't fit in Salt Lake City. I felt like a visitor in someone else's home. But by committing to understanding their local traditions, like why Monday nights were reserved for family nights, my colleagues recognized my respect. And in return, we built teams that thrived on shared goals, not our differences. That's connection capital. The trust you can lean on when challenges arrive, because you've taken the time to understand and affirm the person behind the job title, uniform, or religious label. And in my experience, once that reservoir of goodwill exists, even the toughest barriers can be broken. So how do we build these inclusive networks? This connection capital we've been talking about. I believe it comes down to a few simple steps. First, embrace cultural respect. When I first worked in places with distinct religious practices, whether it was Mormon beliefs or Friday prayers, I learned very quickly that understanding local customs isn't just being polite, it's a sign of respect. So ask questions. If you're unsure of a holiday tradition, say, hey, I'd love to learn more. Curiosity goes a long way. And sometimes it takes more than casual chats. Structured curiosity and dialogue are essential. I find that setting up group sessions where people can share parts of their life can really transform a team dynamic. Once someone opens up about their background or culture, the stereotypes we clung to tend to dissolve, and we start to see each other as layered, complex individuals. And another powerful tool, mentorship and mutual enthusiasm. Don't wait for the perfect match in your circle. Look for mentors and mentees in different industries, backgrounds, or faiths. I've found it's a two-way street. You offer your expertise, I offer mine. This I learn from you, you learn from me approach fast tracks growth on both sides. And finally, sustain the momentum. Remember that one positive encounter can turn into a lifelong bridge if you consciously nurture it. So schedule follow-ups. Don't let this new connection fade when the excitement wears off. I found that the strongest bonds formed happen when we continue to just keep talking, long after the meetings and deadlines. Building inclusive networks isn't a complex formula. It comes down to a few small action steps: practicing respect, investing in mentorship, and staying connected over the long haul. Do this, and the fences we once saw begin to look like open gates, welcoming us into a world of shared growth and collaboration. So let's bring it all home. We've journeyed through hardship and resilience. We've explored connection capital and how it builds from curiosity and empathy. And we've shared practical tips on how to build inclusive networks. If there's one thing that resonates with you today, one takeaway, it's this. Building genuine connections across cultural and social fences requires empathy, curiosity, and shared respect. turning what was once intimidating into vibrant opportunities for unity. Now here's my challenge for you. Identify one fence in your life, a professional barrier, a social divide. And this week, take one concrete step towards building that bridge. Maybe it's asking a colleague for advice or reaching out to someone you've previously misunderstood. When we make empathy and curiosity part of our daily lives, we're investing in connection capital for ourselves and everyone around us. And by doing so, those fences begin to look like open doors, propelling us towards deeper understanding, resilient happiness, and a more successful world for all. Thank you.